So good to talk to you today. Uh, and thanks for letting me record this. I understand you had a couple questions about resumes.
Yes, I
Yeah.
do.
Remind me exactly what that was that you wanted to talk about.
Um, so I am at a point in my life where I have a lot of relevant experience to the things that I want to do. But I want to keep my resume to one page.
Hmm.
So I kind of struggle with how far back I should go, how much information I should put, and kind of under each position, like how much detail to give on like what I was actually doing there. Because I want them to know like kind of what I was doing and what my responsibilities were, like what the position actually means. But also want to have a one-page resume. So
Right. Where I'm going to start with this is by challenging a little bit the principle that you want them to know what you were doing. And the reason is a lot of times if you're talking about industry relevant experience, uh, you don't need to describe your position very much because employers are going to have a pretty good idea of what that position entails.
Mhm.
What we're going to be focused on a little bit more is what your accomplishments were and how that position highlights your professional strengths. Um, so, could you tell me a little more about the industry that you're talking about and some of the experiences that you have relevant?
Yes. So I am in the mental health field, and I've experienced doing peer counseling, crisis counseling. Um, that's the other thing is like I was a peer counselor for a bit, but or a teen counselor for a bit, but it was a different kind of counseling. It wasn't like the mental health counseling. So having that title without the description doesn't really feel right.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then I have experience doing some coaching and therapeutic cuddling work, um, and working in labs, and now I'm in school for social work.
Mm-hmm. One of the things you said there, I'm gonna jump on for just a minute, and there's a couple parts to that. We'll get into it in a second, but and that applies both to your resume and to interviewing, in fact. But you mentioned there was a position where you had the title of a counselor that was maybe a different kind of counseling.
Yeah,
What
I
was
was counselor more like the way counselors used in camp counselor rather than like a mental health counselor. But
gotcha?
I did do things in that position that provided emotional and mental health support to the kids. So
This is something I I run into a lot, right? A lot of people have this, I guess, what I perceive as a hesitation to take full credit for what they did, right? So you just told me you did work that was in line with the mental health field that you're now in.
mhm.
You told me that it was it was relevant experience and that you're hesitant to put that on your resume and make it look like relevant experience. I absolutely understand that. There have been many times I've felt like I needed to qualify something that made me look good or downplay an accomplishment, and it can be a real struggle. Uh, for me, for some of the clients I've worked with, it can feel um, like bragging, or worse, it can feel like not being honest about our the 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 less amazing sides of ourselves. And the reality is, in a situation where you're talking about a resume or a job interview, you are in no way being dishonest by focusing only on the best way to put things. Because this is where you are expected to do that. This is where they want to see nothing but your most shining examples and the absolute best polished version of you and your experiences. So, in a way, by qualifying your experiences further, you're giving them less of what they're looking for. So at the same time, where we do make sure to stay very much within our integrity is to not say anything that's not absolutely true. On the other hand, when it is absolutely true, we can say it. And so if your title, if your job title, if literally what you were called was counselor, that can go on your resume just like that. That said, it might not be that you then described the work you did there as, emotional support and management. And that goes back to what I started with, which is that we're not putting down as much of our job duties as much as the accomplishments we have and our the highlights of our strengths in those positions.
Can I pause you for a second?
Absolutely.
How, what do you mean by focus on accomplishments and not like, because I feel like a lot of my accomplishments are also just like the tasks expected of me in that position. And I'm not really sure how to separate those or like what you mean by like focusing on the accomplishments and not the tasks.
Absolutely. Great question. And this goes ultimately comes around to your point of keeping your resume short and tight and relevant. And I'll provide a little more answer to that question in a second, but very briefly, the way this ties back to keeping your resume short is by putting in only the information that puts you in the absolute best light. We're then taking out any information that is less stellar about you. And it's a lot easier to bring that resume down to 1 page in length. Of course, you're going to have many more qualities, wonderful qualities, stellar qualities than could fit on 1 page. So we choose the most relevant ones, the most hard-hitting ones for whatever position we're applying to or for the general resume. So it's not quite as challenging as just trying to distill our best selves onto a piece of paper. It's also focusing it on that job. Now, in this case, in every case, the way that we're going to help communicate our accomplishments to other people is through things that are objectively measurable. One great example is anything that has numbers attached to it. That's something you could put on there. That's a good thing to have on your resume. Now, again, you might have too many. You pick the best ones. But start by seeing if you can put a quantifiable measurement on everything on your resume. So if you worked, as you say, at a crisis center, you might field 5 calls a day. You might field 50 or even more. I don't know. That's an example of a number you're going to put down. Averaged 50 calls a day. And this might not be as relevant for a crisis hotline, but if you were in something like customer service and you could put like a percentage of calls that were resolved in a positive direction, 89% customer satisfaction on calls or something like that. So that's one thing, is anytime you can just put numbers on the things you were doing, that's stronger on your resume. And that's where you can describe your job duties. If your job was just to see clients, it's unclear to me whether you saw a couple or a bunch. And for you to put a number on that illustrates to me a lot more of how hard you were working, how diligent you were in seeing those clients and scheduling and all that. Another area is any time you were given an award or a recognition by leadership, by management, anything like that. So pick, let's say, the most relevant experience you have to the job you want to have next. So what would you like to be doing next?
I'm in school to become a trauma therapist. That's the plan.
All right. Now, what do you think is your last experience that's most aligned with that?
Probably working as a professional cuddler. My focus in that has also been trauma. So most of the clients that I have taken on for a couple years now have been people currently dealing with or struggling through trauma, usually also in some kind of, psychotherapy, but are really, there's a huge need to like reintegrate into your body when you've been through something traumatic. So doing something like professional cuddling and focusing on that field, um, I think has been, yeah, I mean, that's pretty much, I think that has been the most relevant to what I want to do moving forward.
That's a great example in that it's nicely challenging to quantify.
Hmm.
Um, so one obvious number you can attach is simply the number of clients you saw on a regular basis, or the hours you spent seeing clients, anything like that. Um, but tell me a little bit more of the ways you might measure that work, or some of the things you did in that role, even a success story or two that you had.
Jeez. Um, I've been working with a closeted trans woman who has a lot of issues. Her major thing is dissociation, so just practicing experiencing bodily sensations and like being in your body is really what we focus on. Um, and honestly, like every session I've had with her has, I mean, she's not always the most present, and she doesn't always consider them successes, but to me, they've all felt like amazingly successful.
What's felt successful to you about that?
I mean, I can tell just the difference in the way she holds herself when she walks in and walks out of my space.
Mhm.
She like generally walks in very like slumped and kind of curled into herself and avoids eye contact at all costs and speaks in like one word sentences. And by the time we're like wrapping up, she's often there's a lot of laughter in our sessions. She usually holds prolonged eye contact with me, especially towards the end of a session, just kind of like lying and eye gazing. Um, yeah, there's just a lot more smiles and lightness, and like she holds herself upright, and it just, I don't know, feels like she feels better about walking out into the world. And that
Yeah.
feels good to me.
See, you used a great phrase there. Uh, you said it feels like she feels better. What if you were to do the opposite of putting it in terms of your experience and put it objectively? How would you describe what happens objectively?
um I mean, objectively, there's like a lessening of like tension of, yeah, I don't know what like a quantifiable way to say like there's just like a lightness, like she's just lighter. um
So that's an interesting thing in that um, there are elements of what you saw that made you think she was lighter, right? And this is a very granular example, but we're going to want to find some of those the things that you perceived and draw them out into objective facts that you can state. And in a case like this, you had one success. Clearly, you were very invested in this person and their well-being and in the work you were doing together. So you're in what you're saying to me, I can see the passion you brought to this. At the same time, it's more challenging to show that passion in a resume.
right.
And that's where we go to using objective measures in a context like that. And there I would say something like, um, to stay granular for a moment, observed body language and affect showing, an indication of greater confidence, including prolonged eye contact,
Yeah, and standing up straight, and yeah,
like
that was very well worded.
more time smiling, laughing, and an upright body posture, right? So those are things you can talk about maybe in an interview if an example comes up. But on a resume, we're going to take things like that and draw them out into a trend, right? So over the course of however many weeks, saw however many clients, and observed consistent trends in positive affect, increased mood, increased confidence, increased ability to connect with themselves and with me as a practitioner, whatever it is, right? So you're going to take a measure that somebody else might be able to use and apply that to the work you're doing. Now, one of the reasons that this is a particularly challenging example is I'm guessing that, like a massage therapist or many psychotherapists, in doing this work, you were doing it independently. You didn't have somebody working that you reported to. You didn't have a direct superior.
Yeah.
So you can't really say, my manager said I did a great job. I got a recognition from my company, right? At the same time, what that means is you can highlight the fact that you created a business single-handedly. You personally found, supported these clients on your own. That falls into the category of a leadership, right? So this is another category of things we want to put on the resume. So something with numbers, something that shows a clear positive outcome, objective positive outcome, like a percentage increase in sales or revenue, more numbers there. Recognition from other people, awards of some kind, and leadership. These are 4 categories that we would love to have on the resume. The last one being sort of, I don't know if this kind of falls in line with what I already said, but specific accomplishments. If you can say, this one time I did this amazing thing and everybody loved it, with a little bit more numbers attached, that's a good thing to have on the resume. So in this case, we're going to look for a way to take that specific experience and highlight the work that you put into creating it as a business. For every kind of work that you're going to be looking for, the skills you developed in starting your own business are going to be relevant, and they're going to be transferable. And if you can articulate that the right way, it's going to make you look great. The challenge is, if you don't articulate that, then whatever employer you're looking at might not see that you have these wonderful qualities. So what are some of the things that you did to make that into a business?
I mean, advertising, mostly online, some like Facebook ads and things like that. Um, yeah, that's most of it, really.
So the reason I'm smiling right now is because this is a perfect example. This is exactly why I love helping people with this process. Because you did not go from having this idea of helping people through physical touch to running a business by mostly doing some advertising on Facebook, maybe.
All right.
Yeah, right? But it's so hard, especially when we're so invested in something like building our own business. It's so hard to recognize how much we put into it. I had a client one time where we built her resume from scratch. And I was asking her about, granular accomplishments from specific positions she could put in. And she And she sort of out of the blue said, "Oh, and I started my own wedding cake company. Should I put that on there?" And my forehead hit my desk because I said, "Well, how long did that go on for?" And she said, "Oh, about 10 years." Because that's an amazing accomplishment, right? That was fantastic. And she did so much on her own. And yes, it was absolutely a challenge to distill that into something we could put on a resume, but it was because there was so much there. So the number one thing that comes to my mind when you say that you did this yourself is you went from not very many clients to some clients or to a lot of clients, which is an objective increase. Very clear, you built this business to seeing this many clients per week, per month, whatever. You built this business into supporting 5 clients a week in their journey through past traumatic experiences, however you want to put it. But the other side of it is how you did that, right? You identified the people you wanted to help. You went through a process of refinement. Oh, I want to help everybody, I assume. Well, okay, everybody doesn't quite work. I want to help some people. Which people? These people. Why? Because of this. How? How am I going to do it? Did you feel like you learned anything or developed professionally during this time?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Oh yeah, definitely. So putting some ads on online somewhere.
Yeah, that was probably the thing I learned most.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I learned a lot of yeah, just a lot around communication, a lot around how to maintain a client. Like just if I haven't heard from a client in a while, chances are if I send a message being like, "Hey, haven't heard from you," they'll be like, "Oh, yeah, I definitely want to see you again." And if I don't do that, that's one less client I have.
Right.
um,
And
yeah.
however much you want to help people, if you need to run a business, you need to run a business, which requires consistent clientele.
Mhm.
What's an example of something you did to help with your professional learning and growth?
Um, I did Betty Martin's Like a Pro. And I've done circling immersions, which are partially for me, but I initially got interested in that stuff because it went hand in hand with the work that I was doing.
So here's this is right back in line with present your best self, leave out the rest. If you did something that was partially for yourself and partially for professional development, it was objectively, it was for professional development. And
Yeah.
it's not required that on your resume you state what percent was professional development.
And my first circling immersion was specifically for therapists, coaches, and healers.
Exactly. You attended professional trainings to improve your ability to connect with your clients.
Yeah.
That's not the line as it's going to go on your resume. Attended is never the beginning of a line on a resume, right?
Right.
Need a little bit more action oriented. We need a little bit more outcome driven measure to put on a resume. But that's a starting point. And that's the kind of thing when you have 10 to 15 lines like that on your resume under a given experience, you can start to combine them. You can start to take some out and leave only the best and make sure that what you end up with is a crucial list of your best accomplishments. Now, when I say best accomplishments, I fully expect that you will be uncomfortable looking at this list because it will show only the best side of yourself. And when you're focused on building a business, you're not focused on only acknowledging the best side of yourself. But it's an important thing for professional growth into the next role you want to have. This is also a great example of why, to just plug what I do for a minute, why it's so valuable to work with someone to help draw these out. Because it's very difficult for most of us to recognize our strengths on our own. Sometimes we need someone else asking, oh, and what did you do about that? Oh, what happened then? Did that lead to a positive outcome? Did you take any other steps? What else did you do? What else was involved? Oh, well, it looks like you took a leadership role that led to an increase in XYZ and had the result of making the company better, improving your own business, something like that. So just from everything we've said, if you were to take a second and describe your therapeutic touch business for me for a resume, you're just going to put a line down on a resume, what comes to mind to you?
Helping individuals navigate physicality and closeness while dealing with trauma. I don't know, something along those lines.
Great. We're going to say, so for the line I'm talking about, we're going to say none of those things.
Okay.
Because that's describing what you did. And I want to talk about the business for a second.
Okay.
We're going to start with a word like founded or created or grew or something that sounds very professional and business oriented.
Okay. So co-founded a therapeutic touch practice.
Yeah. Or even let's say, we're just going to leave out founded. We're going to say grew a practice, a private therapeutic touch practice, whatever, up to a consistent, however many clients a week. And you can finish that line with something like with over this many clients seen in a whatever span of time, or this much positive feedback, or some other positive indicator from the business. But it's going to be objective, measurable, and about the business, not about what you did within the business.
Okay.
About the outcome, I should say.
Okay.
Now, all of this relates to the fundamental principle of your resume. What is your resume at its heart? It is a marketing document.
Yeah. Trying to sell myself. Not great
Exactly.
at that.
You're marketing yourself as an employee. And as such, everything on that document should be a highlight of your positive qualities, of what's going to make you a good employee, of some attribute you have that they will want to stand up in their chair and shout when they see it and say, this is the person we want. If there is a line on your resume that does not do that, take it out.
All right, so I have to pretty much start over on the resume front.
Well, here's the great thing is you don't. You can start with what you have and add in anything else you can think of. And that's when you look at all those things and say, okay, where can I make this sound a little better? Where can I replace this with a better accomplishment? Where can I turn this on its head So I take out this part and I put in that and use that as a starting point, right? You probably also have some solid formatting in the current resume, and resume formatting is kind of annoying to deal with. So if you've already got it good, use that.
I do have a question about that also, actually. I do generally like the format that I have. Um, but, and this kind of goes along with the whole one page thing, it often feels like really cluttered to me, and I don't know how to make it feel just like cleaner and not so crowded.
It sounds like you've got a lot of words on your resume and not a lot
Yeah,
of.
I think it's just way too wordy.
When you put down your accomplishments and experience, are you using exclusively bullet points? Are you using paragraph formats? What does that look like?
Um, I pretty much have like 1 to 3 written out sentences under each thing,
As bullet points or,
not as bullet points.
and then do you have bullets below that?
No.
Personally, the format I like to use is, and I can share this with you. I share this with all of my clients. Um, it's really simple, you know, kind of uh, mirroring it so you can see it. I guess on my screen, this is showing as the left side, so it's working right correctly. So, but it would be like name, contact information, a brief summary of professional highlights, accomplishments. So this might be where you put co-founded a business and grew it to blah blah blah. This much success.
Hmm.
Below that, education, quick bullet point of highest level of education, maybe two if you've got like a PhD and a master's or master's and an undergraduate degree. That can also go at the bottom, top or bottom, doesn't matter too much. And then professional accomplishments, professional experience. Uh, I have simply the company name, job title, dates worked there, and a list of bullet points relevant to that job, and usually location of the company or of the job. I don't have any paragraph format description.
Okay.
Uh, I do want to make sure there is substantial white space on the resume. If that means reducing the font size a little bit, that means increasing the line spacing to 1.15 so it just looks a little bit easier to read,
Hmm.
do that. This is a marketing document, and the way it looks sometimes is as important as the content.
Hmm.
So uh, we're going to have to wrap up in just a minute here, but I want to ask you for one more example of uh, from a totally different kind of job, from a totally different experience. What's the experience, and what's a line that you'd like to put on your resume there, or what's an accomplishment you had that we can turn into an entry on your resume?
Um, at my current field placement for school, this is not what's on the resume. This is just context. um, I I'm a social work intern at City Year, working with AmeriCorps volunteers in Denver. So I designed and facilitated consent workshops for 54 18 to 25-year-olds in the Denver area, and received positive feedback from like 80 something percent of the participants.
That is beautiful. You've picked up everything I've put down here. One more question about that. Did you solicit feedback?
Uh, Not formally. I welcomed feedback. I did not like send anything out to like get, but like 80% of people who participated made a point to tell me how great the workshop was.
So you received uh, over or roughly 80% of the participants volunteered positive feedback. Not a big change, not a big difference, but I was thinking about that when I heard it.
Mhm.
That's fantastic. Uh,
Good about it.
you should. The other two questions that come to mind are how many workshops? She had the number of participants. Fantastic. You had the age range to make it specific. Also great. Um,
So it was one day. They were broken into 4 groups. So I ran the same workshop 4 times in smaller groups.
uh, gotcha. Um, and uh, and what was the outcome of that? Do you have a clear outcome besides positive feedback from them? Did you
Um, I don't
something?
have anything that's been like properly tracked. Um, but I mean the workshop was all about communication and boundaries. That like that's what consent is. So
Right.
uh, a lot of them were the reason I ran the workshops was because a lot of them were struggling in their placements with feeling like there was too much being put on them, but feeling like they weren't allowed to say no to the teacher they were supposed to be helping. So in the weeks following, I got a lot more people telling me that they had difficult conversations or enforced boundaries or said no to something than
What do you
before.
mean you don't have tracked results?
I mean, I don't have like numbers on
You don't have a
that.
spreadsheet? I don't care if there's a spreadsheet. This is exactly what I mean. Leading to participants reporting stronger boundaries and clearer communication in their professional environments.
Mhm.
That's 100% what you're going for, and it came through exactly that way.
Mhm.
I want to give you a high five, air five right now. Just boom. Great work. And really let every detail come out that might show you in a better light. Every positive can be distilled into a piece of information that you can put on the resume. Once you have those on there, you can take out the ones that are not the absolute best. Remember, this is not a is there good or is there not good. There is good. This is a greatest hits. So that flows into the last point I wanted to address here, which is your question of how long does the resume go? And the answer is it, it the resume needs to highlight your ability to do that job well. It doesn't need to go back a certain amount of time. It doesn't need to stop at a certain amount of time. It does need to show that you have, as well as possible, it needs to show that you have a ability to work consistently in a professional context. So you like to show some good time span of staying at a job. You'd like to show, ideally, not a lot of big gaps. On the other hand, you can say that for a job that had in the case you had gaps between your most relevant work experiences, you can put a less relevant job on there, but make it the description really brief. Or you can have your professional experience byline say most relevant experience. There are a couple other ways to format a resume where you can, for example, have most of it be your accomplishments. And at the bottom, you list your experiences where you can just kind of put one line for everything, one line for each thing. And it takes up less room per experience, and it highlights what you did at each one in the section above. For example, there's a couple different ways to format it, depending on the individual needs. I like to pick one or another. It sounds like you have a substantial amount of really relevant experience that you can just put on in sort of the conventional reverse chronological order. And just when you get to the end of the page, you stop.
Good advice.
Yeah. So, did you have any other questions?
No, I feel like we pretty much covered it. Thank you. That was incredibly helpful.
Awesome. If you could summarize what you got from this today, how would you put it in your words?
Um, I mean, I think I didn't have a concept of how to approach a resume. Like for years, I've been building off of basically what I had in high school and picking up bits and pieces from people here and there, but never like got a concept of like what people are looking for or like what it should actually say. So yeah, things like focusing on accomplishments and not on tasks, and things like the numbers and the leadership, and like I feel like that is all new information to me and just changes the way I approach the resume in general. So thanks.
Well, good, right?
Yeah.
I will say, I will make one more point before we get off, which is, do you know how long employers spend looking at a resume when they first look at it, typically?
No idea, but I can't imagine very long.
That's exactly it. There are a lot of resumes in that stack. They want to get through all of them. They might spend 30 seconds or a minute looking at that resume at first. And that's why anything that's not amazing about you doesn't go on there. It needs to hit them hard. It needs to hit them quickly. And the only job of the resume is to get you to that interview. Now, if you want to know uh, more about how to interview, that's another call. We can do that sometime too. Uh, I do want to clarify as well that for most people I work with, I'll be doing some of this sort of consultative work to draw out the strengths and accomplishments we want to put on the resume, and then more of writing that resume myself on behalf of my clients. You simply had some questions you wanted addressed, so I wanted to take time and answer those as well as possible. But I like to make that distinction clear. That's all. So thank you so much, and I can't wait to hear about the results of your job search.
Yeah. Thanks, Corwin. This was great.
Uh,